introduction. You probably hear my dogs barking. They're right outside there. But anyway, so Cassandra, good to see you and welcome
Glad to be here.
welcome hero leaders and appreciate what you do each and every day. And I know we tell you that a lot, but we mean it. And if there's things that you need, please let us know. And again, Wendy hates that she couldn't make it, but she's here in spirit and may pop in. You never know. But Cassandra Barnett has been a school librarian for 46 years in both elementary and secondary school libraries. So she comes to us with a wealth of knowledge and experience. She has presented at state and national conferences on a variety of topics concerning school libraries. An active member of the American Association of School Librarians, she has served on committees both in ALA, AASL, been a member of the AASL Board of Directors, and is past president of AASL. She is currently the program advisor for school libraries in the Arkansas Department of Ed. So we're honored and blessed to have Cassandra be a partner with us and part of our overall KEDC Grants family. As you know, we have a large group of leaders and educators that we work with. So, Cassandra, just take it away again. I'll
Okay,
lead, and you've got screen share if you want it. And
I
if you need
do.
something, throw it in the chat or you know, unmute and ask questions. And if you need something, let us know. Okie dokie. We're
Okay,
gonna roll.
let me get to my slides. And so in talking with Wendy, she attended a workshop that I did at the AASL conference back in the fall. And my topic was using historical objects and art to lead to civic engagement. And so she asked me to do some presentations for you all because you all are headed in a similar direction. So today, I'm going to start by talking about the fact that I have been involved in a project. The pandemic kind of killed the program when we were really just getting started good, but it was a training, a 5-day training that we were able to do for teachers and school librarians on using object-based learning to lead to civic engagement. And we had a number of partners. The Clinton Presidential Library was one of our partners. The U.S. Department of State's Diplomatic Reception Rooms was one of our partners. The Butler Center for Arkansas Studies and Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art were just a few. And then we, a year or two later, we added the Arkansas Division of Heritage. And so we had a number of partners, but all of us were working towards this idea of using historical objects and art to lead students to develop civic engagement projects. And so this is my philosophy, and it's one that has evolved over the years, but it is that every object has a story, and that's how we engage students, is with that story. So I'm going to introduce you to my grandmother Grace, who had this particular object, which I've inherited. And would anybody like to put in the chat what they think that object is?
What do y'all think? Throw it in the chat.
A press of some kind. Reminds you of a butter bell, a cookie press, a stamp, a churn. All of those are really good guesses, and those are going to be similar to what students will look at. And actually, this is a butter mold. It's made out of wood. And what has always fascinated me about this piece is that even though you can see there's two separate pieces in here, I can't tell. There's no seams, so I can't tell how they were put together. But it is a butter mold. And just a little bit of background, my mother talks about when she would go to stay with her grandparents on the farm, that this butter mold would be there, and one of her chores was to take the milk from the cow that they just milked and put that in a churn and use the butter churn until it became butter. And then it would be poured into this mold and taken down into a cellar where it was dark and cool. And so that's the story my mother tells. But the story that that connects this object to my grandmother is that they lived in the 30s. They lived next to a railroad, the railroad tracks, and this, of course, was one of the things that my grandmother expected, was that there would always be men jumping off of the train and knocking on her back door and asking if she had any work that they could do in exchange for food. So she developed this habit of not only keeping a list of chores that needed to be done, but cooking extra food every day to make sure that she had enough food to feed the men that might stop by. And so when we talk about this, I'd like you to think for just a minute. We're talking about a butter mold. We're talking about the Great Depression. What are some issues that come out of that with just a little bit of the story that I've told you? You can pop that into the chat. Unemployment. The need for work, yes. Homelessness, absolutely. Reusing and saving everything. Very little store-bought stuff, including food. So another one that generally comes up when we talk about that is food insecurity, people not having enough to eat. And so now that we've mentioned all of those, and I see money there as well, do any of those issues are still of importance to us today? Absolutely. We have people that are food insecure. We have people that I mean, the homeless population, we keep hearing more and more people are becoming homeless. And I heard a study that it used to be that most homeless people were in their 20s and 30s, but now most of the homeless people that we have are in their 50s and 60s. And so again, and yes, the being food insecure. I know in Arkansas we have a huge population of students that live in poverty and are food insecure. So unemployment doesn't seem to be as big a problem, or at least when we hear about it on the news, but there are still plenty of people that don't have jobs or don't have good jobs that pay well enough to have a living wage. And so those are all issues that, even though it comes out of a historical object, we can still connect that to issues of today. So just to mention a few that are actions, because remember what I'm talking about is that the projects that we worked on included a civic engagement piece, and the And the civic engagement piece, we asked those to be student-led but teacher-facilitated. So the teacher did not decide what the civic engagement project would be. The students decided that, and they developed the actions. But here are just some examples. We had students that served food in a soup kitchen. We had students who took donations and donated them to food banks. We had students that developed a community garden. So those are just some of the examples. I do want to share this. I know that you all have used a number of things from the Library of Congress, but the National Archives also has some really great analysis sheets of different objects. And you can see, even though both of these are for analyzing an artifact or an object, you can see that one is referred to as a novice. And this is one that I would use with elementary students. I would still probably use this one at first with high school students because they're not used to thinking about objects and artifacts in this way, but eventually I would move them to this one. However, I think I would stay with this one with my elementary students because it is more concrete in terms of the questions that it asks, and it gives them a little more examples. But you can find those at the National Archives. I know you've done some other work with them, but I really like these documents that they have. They have them for photographs, written documents, artifacts, posters, maps, cartoons. So there's a wide variety of those, and these are also available in Spanish. So again, these are really great documents to work with to get your students to think about objects in a little bit deeper way than they might normally think about in your conversations. So another strategy that we use besides, I know you're familiar with See, Think, Wonder, and that's one we use quite a bit, but this is another one that I've found, and it works with elementary students too, but it's taking an object, any object, that can connect with your curriculum, and then having a discussion about this object for why might this particular object be relevant to me. Why does it matter to me? And then that second question is, well, why would it matter to the people around me? And then finally, so why does it matter to the world? So I think that's just another pretty quick strategy that you can use in dealing with objects and getting your students to think about those. So this is the process that we developed for leading to a civic engagement project. And basically it starts with the themes from history. So once we've looked at a particular object and we've connected it with issues from history, and then again connected it to today, we had students then brainstorm and select an issue that they wanted to pursue and find out more about. And so once they've decided on that issue, then in that step 3, it's to really give them the opportunity to research that issue, look around their community to see what community partners are actually trying to address this issue, and then identify solutions that and actions that the students could take that might have a positive impact on that issue within their community, and then developing an engagement plan that would let them take that action, and then finally putting it into action. And then the most important thing is to then go back and reflect and refine it to take another opportunity. I will tell you that I'm going to give you a link to a Google folder, and this document, which actually is a little more in depth than just what I showed you. It takes you through an example of how to do that. And so that document is in is in the Google folder, so you have access to that to help you. Whoops, let's go back because my finger trigger went too fast. There's another strategy that I like, which when we're thinking about those issues and starting to brainstorm an issue and then how might we turn it into action, is to just ask these questions. And with older students, we would use a little bit more complex language, but with my elementary students, even with my kindergarten and first grade students, I can ask these questions. If I have an issue, for instance, food insecurity, what can I do to contribute to help my friends? What action can I take that might help to contribute positively in my school? And then finally, is there something an action that we can take where we can actually help people in our town? So I think that brings it a little closer and more concrete to what my elementary students are going to be able to understand and think through. So can students make a difference? Well, I shared a few examples, but I want to show some more. These students actually took a piece of property that was on their school grounds that had been undeveloped, and they designed an outdoor classroom so that students could not only go out there, and they incorporated some playground equipment as well, but they put spaces there where students could observe nature and could use it as a classroom. And so one of their projects that was going to take place was to start going around their school and building in some garden spaces, not only flowers and bushes, but also food gardens. And in part of that, what they did was they designed these rocks, and you can't see the messages, but they had positive affirmation messages that they actually painted on the rocks that they decorated, that were put around in all of those the garden spaces and around the outdoor classroom. These are middle school students. They were 5th through 7th grade students. And their project, they identified a veteran that had somehow he had been buried in their local cemetery, but he didn't have a tombstone. And they interviewed family members and people that he knew and grew up with, and then they decided that he needed a tombstone. So they actually raised money to pay for a tombstone. And while they were doing that, they identified a number of other veterans in their hometown, and they convinced the mayor of the town, and this is him, signing a resolution to declare, we honor our Veterans Day. And they actually organized a parade. They had the veterans invited. They just made it a huge event that honored these veterans that were living in their community. This is another group of students who decided that there were a number of students in their school that had families that were food insecure, and so they created a community garden and invited anyone in the community to not only contribute to it, but they were able to get a big enough plot of land that they could give people a small space where they could actually grow their own food and come and take care of it. And then these kids pledged to continue this even after the school year was over, to keep coming back and making sure that this community garden continued to benefit the community. But I want to tell you about Faith White. She was one of our students and one of our teachers that we trained, and she taught fourth grade. And she just happened to be in our training. This training lasted a year. We supported our teachers for a whole year with mentors and regional teams to develop a curriculum, to connect to their curriculum using object-based learning. And they designed a unit that led to a civic engagement piece. And she had everything all planned out. Their students had actually decided what they were going to be doing. And it was like she had, she was psychic and she could see their topic was creating a bad day action plan, because people are always faced with something unexpected, and it could either lead to just really having a terrible bad day and reacting to it in a negative way, or coming up with some tools to how to make sure that when you have a bad day, you have a way to create it. And what you're seeing here are pictures the kids all took, selfies of themselves, making faces of, this is how I look when I have a bad day. And so they had decided that what they were going to do was help develop this bad day action plan. And they had already started to put everything in place. And then the pandemic hit and schools closed. And so we all transitioned, as many people all over the country did, to learning virtually. And so she had to take her bad day and make some adjustments. And so she adapted all of her remaining lessons to online class learning, and her kids continued to do that. And they talked about how they could turn their civic engagement project into something that they could continue safely. And so and again, this was a student-led, teacher facilitated. So her students decided that they were going to they had these scripts that had originally were going to be skits, and they were going to go into classrooms in their school. They were going to go to other elementary schools in their district and perform these skits and talk about their bad day action plan. But instead, when we had to shift, they converted those scripts into comics, and they added personal stories from new and past experiences and then spread those stories around. And so they used Pixton software, and they took their scripts and turned them into these little cartoons. And then they developed a website and invited the students in their school to come to their website. And again, it's when change chooses you, and they became what they called the Resilience Rangers. And this website, the link is there in the slides, and you will have access to this. But they created posts. They had resources. They had some interactive ideas. They have testimonials and examples of what they did. And so they became the Resilience Rangers. And I just love this project. And it's just a really brilliant way as to how a teacher was able to pivot her class from in-person learning to virtual learning and still have an impact on the kids. So I love this project. And I encourage you to actually go list. Within the first month, they had 350 site visitors, and that included other students, teachers, families, counselors, and others. So I love that idea. I've got a trigger finger here on my mouse pad. Anyway, and so this is a digital class photo of of the class and some of the participants who joined in with them and came. So I love this. I love this idea, and I think it's something that could be, everybody can use a bad day action plan. So how do museums fit in this? Because part of our project was that we really connected with museums, and we're continuing to try to do that. Whoops. So one of our museum partners is the Clinton Presidential Library, and Kathleen Pate is someone that that I work closely with on a number of different projects. And one of the things that she has found most valuable about working with teachers in the educational setting of the Presidential Library is building those relationships with teachers, because a lot of teachers come back year after year and they continue to develop projects. And this particular teacher brought her class, and we have an installation there. I don't know if you recognize this little tiny picture, but that's Anne Frank. And the Clinton Presidential Library was one of the recipients of one of the saplings that came from the original tree that Anne Frank talked about in her journal, that was outside the place where they were living in the attic. And she talks about that. So as part, they have an outdoor installation, which includes that. And in addition to that, they've put these panels up, and these particular panels connect some other Arkansas history. I don't know how familiar you are, but Arkansas had two incarceration camps for Japanese Americans during World War II. The Trail of Tears also runs through the top of Arkansas all the way across. And then we have the Little Rock Nine, which is the very infamous integration story in Arkansas. And so these panels have quotes from representatives of each of those particular segments of Arkansas history. And so these students came, and their focus on their field trip was this. And as a result, what they did was they decided that they were going to sign a pledge to work towards peace. So they all have these pledge cards where they have signed that they are going to do what they can to ensure peace. And that wasn't exactly their civic engagement project, but what it is it's that way that they were able to take a field trip to a museum and enrich it with some other activities. It wasn't just the kids wandering around the museum and looking at stuff. And for me, that's a really important thing. And so I want to talk about the fact that especially when I was at the elementary level, one of the things that I did was take my whole school to on field trips to museums. And it required more work. We didn't just get on a bus and you know, let them off and say, we'll see you in 2 hours. I would spend a whole day with the education person at the museum ahead of time, planning the activities that were going to happen. Our students had a focus for when they went to that museum and what they were going to explore. And so we really did try to make it an enriching learning experience that was more than just let's wander around and look at stuff. And and so I've done one where I took students to a museum in Northwest Arkansas, which was where I was based, that had a lot of local history, including a house that two houses that had been moved onto the property. One was a log cabin, and the other was built during the Victorian age. And through living history and some of those things, our students learned a whole lot about that. And included in that museum was a a collection of furniture that was made by an enslaved person. And so we were able to talk about the communities of African Americans who, as they came out of slavery into a more equal part of the community. We were able to discuss that, plus another collection that was at this museum was a huge collection of Native American artifacts, which the museum is now turning back over to the indigenous peoples where they belong. So we were able to talk about that as well. So that really gave our students an opportunity to extend that. And let's see, I want to go back because I have in the Google folder a field trip planning guide that I hope that I've developed over the years to really kind of help me focus. And one is what I would do at the day of the where I'm spending time with the education person to get the logistical information and to think about just exactly what they have to offer and where I can find those connections to my school's curriculum. And then on the flip side of that is then actually thinking about what it is, the logistics of actually taking kids to where we're going, and then what are the activities, the connections, what kinds of products do I want my students to create as a result of this, all of those logistical things. So hopefully you'll find that to be something that is useful to you. Also, whoops, I keep bringing that up. So let's go to the next. So that's how we can kind of extend that. But actually, again, when you start talking about object-based learning, if you go on a field trip and you start to look at the artifacts that are there, that's where you start discovering that local history and connecting it to your community and thinking about how you can take action to turn that into a civic engagement project that, again, contributes back to the community in a positive way. So we have a lot of different products that could come out of this. We've got, and these can also be authentic assessments for projects that the students do to help see what their learning was that took place in those field trips. But then we've also got, we have such great technology now that we can go beyond just some of that paper and pencil stuff, and we can actually have students do oral histories, do audio tours of a particular event, so that you can actually see the places where that event took place, developing podcasts, social media content, etc. Now I'm trying to make sure we get through everything, but I want to talk a little bit about attic archaeology. And this is a project that I worked on with my elementary students. I adapted it when I went to the high school. I adapted it to a high school setting, but this is what we did in elementary. These were my 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And in this project, we started with asking the students, what's in your attic? And of course, some kids didn't have attics, but we really started talking about artifacts of their family, important objects that had some kind of meaning for their family. So we gave them this task. We wanted them to bring an object or a picture of that object because we knew some objects were going to be too precious to actually bring to school, but a picture would work from home, and they had to find one that was at least 20 years old because we wanted it to tell a story. Now, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, 20 years old is ancient. So that seemed really old. We also set up a situation where students that might not have that, because we did have a number of students who moved from apartment to apartment with great regularity, and they might not have something like that. We matched them up with teachers and school personnel that would be willing to share their stories. Because once they brought that object, we wanted them to interview a family member about the object. Why was it important? What stories did it tell about their family? And then once they identified the decade, and we actually had kids that went all the way back to the 1920s and the 1910s. So they were able to do different decades. And this started as a decade project that some teachers came to me and said, we're really tired of doing what we've been doing for the decades. What can we do that's a little different? So this came out of that desire. So we had to incorporate the decade. So they also had to find someone that they could interview who was in school during that particular decade so that they could kind of get a picture of what life was like, what daily life was like for someone their own age. So once they did that, we also did a little bit of research and provided them with some background information about, we talked about the idea of politics literature. We gave them resources that let them do that, but we wanted them to choose, each student, 2 topics that they needed to find some information about that was part of that particular decade. And once they did that, now we had them work in groups. So once they had a decade, then the students that had objects from that same decade worked together in a group, and they actually prepared a museum exhibit for that. And so you can see here's one of them, a photograph of one of the exhibits that a group did. And once they had prepared that, and that all happened in the library, once they prepared that exhibit, then we actually had a day where all of the classes came in and the students acted as docents and talked about their exhibit and what they learned. And then we also had a parent night where they did the same thing as parents came to visit. So it turned out to be a really great project, and we refined it and did it for a number of years. So again, even back then, I was always interested in that idea of object-based learning. So that's attic archaeology. And I will tell you that in the Google folder, I have that project written up for you if you are interested in thinking about adapting that to a class in your school. So this is just another way that we have used artifacts and developed a virtual museum. And so again, I'm going to introduce you to my grandmothers. This is my grandmother Grace, and you can see there's the butter mold. And then this is my grandmother Pearl. And my grandmother Pearl was a bit of a her appearance was really important, and one of the few objects that I have from hers is this ivory mirror and brush. And so those were my 2 objects. And again, this is in the 1930s. And if I click on that, nope, that's not how I want to do that. So if I click on this, I've set this up so that I can click on the butter mold and it will take me to my virtual exhibit. And again, you're going to see there's the butter mold. So if I click on the butter mold, there's my story, my signage for that, and then pictures of the butter mold. So you can see, again, this idea that my grandmother had this butter mold, and it was used to make butter. And when it was time to eat, the butter was turned out of the mold onto a small plate, and bread was almost always served. And of course, what's bread without butter? So then you can return back to this, to the room where the exhibit is, and you can go to the next exhibit, which is here. And this was something that when I started doing this research, I didn't know. I thought hobos had always been kind of, but really it came out of the Depression with these men that were out of work. And so they would hop on a train, which was called riding the rail, and they would go in search of some temporary work. And here again, you can see this story of my grandmother making sure that she could feed those men and give them some dignity by making sure that they had something to eat and doing the work in exchange for that. Then I can go back to my exhibit. And this was something I knew nothing about. But one of the things that happened was that these men, these hobos, developed a pictograph language that they would leave in places so that you would know that there was a kind-hearted woman that lived here that would provide you with food for work, or this person would allow you to sleep in their barn, or this was somebody you needed to stay away from. That was a bad-tempered owner. You need to stay away. Here's an unsafe place. So I found that really fascinating on that pictograph language. So that's my grandmother Grace's exhibit room. But now let's go to my grandmother Pearl. And of course, this talks about the fact that a lot of items were made from ivory. So that could take me into a number of issues with the use of ivory and how that has decimated the animals there, because they were killed for their ivory, but then left to rot. And so again, and then that was one of the introductions of plastic that kind of helped alleviate some of that issue. So there we have that. And then another thing was my grandmother made all of her own clothes. And so Simplicity, Butterick, all of those places, whoops, I'm not sure how I ended up back there. Yes, that in the 30s, again, this was something that came about because the idea of having patterns to make your own clothes came about, and sewing machines had finally by the 30s become so inexpensive that just about everyone could afford to have one. And so naturally patterns came out of that so that you could make your own clothes more easily. And then this reminds me of a dresser that my grandmother had. I remember when I went to her house, it was similar to this. And that takes me to this idea of Art Deco. So that takes me in a whole nother realm of design and how furniture was designed, what houses look like, architecture. So again, it's a wide variety of things that I can research about this object and have a lot of different issues. Anyway, so that's just a real simple setup for how you can do a virtual museum. And I just realized that I did not put instructions in here in my Google folder for how to do that. So I will do that this afternoon when we get off, so that you'll have those if you're interested. I've found that students are pretty tech savvy anymore in terms of being able to do those bells and whistles. So again, so I think it would be, and that's one of the easiest ones, but I think it would be fairly easy for you to teach kids how to do that. But that's my attic archaeology project, and a couple of ways that you can use that. So here are some resources that I think will be helpful to you. If you are not familiar with the Harvard Project Zero, I encourage you to take some time and go look at it. What these are thinking routine strategies, and they have a whole bunch of them. There, of course, they have the exploring art, images, and objects, but there's also one on thinking about the possibilities, looking at controversies, looking at different perspectives, again, investigating objects and systems, digging deeper into ideas. And all of these are ones that, depending on the age of your student, you can still use all of these. I think even with, you know, first and second graders, I would use some of these thinking routines to really help them think a little more deeply about a topic. And so the link is in the chat for that, not in the chat, in the Google folder. And I think that is a really good resource. The History Collab, if you're interested in thinking about civic engagement, then this is a really great resource. They have resources available, and they are really trying to take the idea of history and what we learn from history and how we can apply it to solutions for issues today. So I think, again, this is aimed a little bit more at older students, but I think if you take a look at it and spend some time there, you'll find that there are some things you could adapt to your students. And then finally, Lead Local is another one. And again, it's what they call participatory design. And again, it's just a way to rethink how can you do things better. And so they have a number of strategies here, videos that you can use, and talking about what they do and how you can build some leadership in there. And then finally, I don't know if you are familiar with this, but I started watching these on CBS News, and this is Steve Hartman. He does, Charles Kuralt was a journalist who did this. He would go on the road and he would find just stories of interest about ordinary people. And after he died, Steve Hartman sort of took this up. And what is interesting to me is that Steve Hartman's stories aren't just they are about ordinary people, but what he's looking at is kindness. How do people who are often strangers, how is it that they can exhibit kindness to them, and how they have an impact on other people? And so I have a link there to the YouTube channel that he has with all of these different ones. And one in particular that drew me was, he has a number of them that are about kids and kids doing things that are kind. And the very top one here is actually 2.5 hours long. And so it's not one I would necessarily use with students, but I would watch it because it would give me a lot of ideas. But most of his on the road stories are less than 5 minutes. And he's done a number of them where kids have taken some kind of action that positively impacts their community. And so I encourage you to take a look at these. He's also, he highlighted several teachers, but one in particular shows these on the road videos to his students to teach them about kindness. And so he's actually enfolded it, this on the road series, into his curriculum, and it's one of the focuses of his classroom is how can we be kind to others. So I just love those stories and think it would be something that would inspire you and your students. Finally, here are just a few examples of some pictures, some books that you might find interesting. This one I would use with older students. This is actually the student journalist who went to Parkland and how they responded to the shooting and the actions that they took to try to impact not only their community, but the United States. Makers with a Cause, if your school has a maker space, or if you have one in your classroom, what I like about this one is that the maker space that this particular librarian used was they would survey their community and find needs, and then use their makerspace to meet that need. For instance, one of them was they went to their local animal shelter and found out that the animal shelter was having a hard time having enough leashes for the dogs. And so they went into their makerspace and they made leashes and dog collars for the animal shelter. This is a series, it's called Citizen Kid, and this is just looking at different aspects of our environment and projects that people have taken on to try to improve and how they've taken care of the earth. And this particular one is about the ocean and issues with the ocean and how people have actions they've taken to impact that. And then this one, if you're going to a march, it really it talks about the idea that that we have the right to assemble and express our opinions, and how to prepare for a march. And it's I found it really enlightening, and it's really written at the level of children so that they understand about those marches. So here is the link to the Google folder, and I'm gonna I'll pop it in the chat in a minute, but I want you to just see the resources that I have provided for you. Some of these are ones that I shared with the group last time, which were mostly secondary teachers. And so some of these may not be as appropriate for you, but I've got the field trip planning guide. I've got a lesson plan template that walks you through that. I have the 3 whys, which is that strategy that I shared with you earlier. There is, this is a civic engagement project planning guide right here that you can use. There's that document that I showed you earlier, some other ones. But I also want to share that the attic archaeology project is in here. And so there is the project packet, if you want to use that and adapt it. And those are the slides that I just shared with you. Then I actually have I included the actual slide presentation that Faith White had. I only pulled a few of her slides. This was her unit plan and how she incorporated that, and it's pretty well detailed. And then this was her civic engagement project. And so it's a real nice description of what she did. In addition to that, I've popped in a number of objects. Each one has a description to give you background information on a number of different objects that you might want to use in a lesson that you might design. And many of these come from either the U.S. Department of State's diplomatic reception rooms, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, or the Clinton Library. There's a few from the Clinton Library. Anyway, those are all objects that you might find useful. And let me see. Yeah, whoops. I'm going to, if I can, there we go. I'm going to pop this into the chat so that you have it. Let's see if I can get back. No, I don't want to start at the beginning.
And while she's doing that, I've posted a lesson plan template that Wendy has put together for you and Jamie. We're going to pay you $50 for this assignment that Cassandra's talking about. So you can take a look at that and all the resources. Just a wonderful, wonderful session. I very much enjoyed, and I was on with our other group the other day with Recharge with this, and just excellent resources that I know you all will take advantage of because you are the very best educators we have in our state. So anyway, any questions for Cassandra before we go? And or any questions for me? Go right ahead. Sorry about that.
Well, anyway, this is the assignment. It's in the Google folder as well. But basically it is you can choose one of those objects that I just shared with you and design a lesson using the lesson plan template that Wendy had. And after you've done that, then ask your students to identify issues that are relevant today that they can actually, what I would hope is that they would then choose an object and then think about how they could actually positively contribute to impacting that issue. And then you can go ahead and use that lesson plan template. And what I would hope is that your students would actually get excited about doing a project like this and contributing positively to their community. I've found it to be, I've never known students to not get really engaged in this idea. And so here is my contact information. Again, the link to the Google folder. And if you have any questions or if you would, or even if you want to ask about something else, my email is there and I'm happy to respond to you. And I know that Wendy and I are going to be having some additional conversations because we've got some other ideas about things that we might be able to help you incorporate into your teaching. And I'm surprised that I managed to get it within the hour. I
Sandra,
always have so much that I want to share and never enough time.
once again, excellent information for you all to take back. And you're getting lots and lots of support and shout outs via social media. X used to be
Right.
Twitter. So I'm reposting those as we go. And thank you all so much for doing that. And again, we want to showcase you and what you're doing in your classrooms, showcase you as the excellent educators as you are. So please, when you do that, make sure you tag us so we can repost and things like that. I need to post the evaluation. And again, $50 for that activity that Cassandra shared there. Then I shared the link for the lesson plan, and it'll have some information there. Just fill that out. And timeline, we're going to have another session, and we'll get that to you. But try to have it finished prior to June is kind of a long shot. But before that, before the end of the school year, and there's so many wonderful opportunities that you have. I mean, I can see integrated units with this. There's just so many ideas that you can share and have your kids really be engaged with. So I'll stay on as long as you need and here for any questions. Cassandra's here. If you have KEDC grants questions, KEDC questions, I'll hang on as long as you need. So I'll go ahead and stop recording now.